Welcome to a special episode of Faces of Abortion. As you're probably aware, Sandra Day O'Connor has recently resigned from the United States Supreme Court. This presents the President and the Senate and you and me as citizens of the United States a very unique opportunity to influence the future of our country. And on this episode of Faces of Abortion with my special guest and host Clayton Trotter and Molly White, we're going to be talking about the Constitution, about the Supreme Court, about Roe v. Wade, and what you can do as a United States citizen to influence the U.S. Senate to pick the right judge to replace Sandra Day O'Connor. Please join us for today's episode of Faces of Abortion.
So it just overwhelmed me. And I thought the only way to escape the pain was to take my life.
I had a fear that I wouldn't be able to have my own children.
It brings heartache. It brings hurt.
And I knew they were tearing my baby apart.
I remember the cold feeling of the room.
I remember laying there and I just said to myself that I will never forgive myself for what I'm doing.
I believe that my life was spared that night just so that I could be here right now and say abortion hurts women.
Welcome to a special episode of Faces of Abortion. I'm your host, Molly White, and I'm here with my co-host, Clayton Trotter, the General Counsel of the Justice Foundation, and Alan Parker, the President of the Justice Foundation, and we're here to discuss a special program.
That's right, Molly. As most of the members of our audience know, Sandra Day O'Connor has resigned from the United States Supreme Court. And that's important to our show because on Faces of Abortion, we talk about the consequences of abortion, and we have women every week telling how it's hurt them. Mm-hmm. We've had men on this program telling how it's hurt them, and family members. Mm-hmm. And none of that pain and injury to women would have occurred if it had not been for the decisions of the United States Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, the two cases that brought abortion to America. Mm-hmm. So this is a very historic opportunity when a Supreme Court justice resigns. Clayton, what's your reaction to that?
Well, particularly a Supreme Court justice who came on the court criticizing Roe and saying it was bad law, and who has since changed her position while she was on the court, and most recently voted in favor of partial birth abortion, or extending partial birth abortion. So this is an opportunity for the people of the United States, particularly the people of the United States watching this program, to affect the future of the nation in a public policy way. What the court did in Roe was create public policy, which is not the role of the court, in my opinion.
Right.
That's right. And on this program, we're going to tell the members of the audience how they can contact their United States senators to be involved in the process. We're going to cover the judicial nominations process. We're going to cover the history of Roe v. Wade, as you've sort of indicated a little bit. We're going to then tell them what is the proper standard for interpreting the Constitution. We want everybody to be kind of educated on this. What the Constitution is, what it means, and who should be deciding these issues is very, very important. And then we're going to just let everybody be involved in this process, because as United States citizens, we originally, we the people, adopted a Constitution. And it is the job of the judiciary to interpret that Constitution and follow it.
Right.
In fact, they swear an oath to defend this Constitution, meaning the one that was written by the people and ratified by the people of the United States. So this is a very important issue.
That's right. You know, and so many people take abortion, for example, saying that it's a woman's constitutional right. Well, they made it a right, but it's never intended in the Constitution that women or doctor should have the right to kill unborn children. I mean, that is something that Roe v. Wade brought into America, actually just shoved it down our throats, really, when we weren't wanting it or ready for it.
All right, and that came about in '73. Clayton, tell us a little bit about the Roe and Doe decisions.
Well, you know, I was a first-year law student when Roe v. Wade was decided, and it was such an enormous decision. It was breathtaking to those of us that were studying law at the time. And what the court did in Roe was set up a trimester system, and they said, well, in the first trimester, you could have an abortion if a woman wanted it on demand. The second trimester, some regulation. Third trimester said the states could prohibit it if they wanted to. But then the Doe case, the companion case to Roe, said, well, there's a health exception, though, to this trimester system, so that if a woman's health is involved, then they can have an abortion up until the day before the child is born. And it's that health exception that gave us partial birth abortion.
All right, now we represent the two ladies that we're talking about, Roe and Doe.
Right.
Their real names are Norma McCorvey of Dallas, who was Roe of Roe v. Wade, and Sandra Cano, who was Doe of Doe v. Bolton. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
And both of those women now have cases in which we represent them. They're seeking to reverse their own legal cases, aren't they?
That's correct. And before Sandra Day O'Connor resigned, the Roe case, we took that case all the way back to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did what is known as deny cert, meaning they would not hear the case.
Right.
Now, they didn't hear any of our arguments, they didn't consider any of our evidence.
They didn't rule against us.
Didn't rule against
Over
us.
1,000 affidavits of
Right.
women who've been hurt by abortion,
They
as to
didn't
where
wanna-
Norma had one affidavit to have Roe v. Wade.
Right. And they didn't want to hear any of that. So the Doe case is now pending in the 11th Circuit.
All right.
And so it is absolutely crucial who the next Supreme Court justice is, because now the president has the opportunity to appoint someone who will be a strict constructionist as distinguished from a living Constitution jurist. Now, we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
All right, well, let's go back to Roe and Doe, because you
Right.
talked about it coming about, and it was just the Supreme Court, and it was breathtaking. Was it a exercise in raw judicial power, as
Well,
one of the
that's-
judges said?
That's
or?
what one of the judges called it, and it's legislative. They said, well, we're set up a scheme much like a legislature would act.
Was abortion legal in most places or illegal?
Abortion was illegal in most states. Texas had a law that prohibited abortion except to save the life of the mother. Now, there was an exception for, if you will, self-defense, for the woman to save her own life.
And life, we should try to save both. And that's what
right.
doctors do today. They save the mother and the child if they can do so.
That's right.
And usually they can.
And nobody dreamed, nobody in their wildest dreams thought that we would have 1.5 million, 1,200,000 abortions a year. I mean,
Well, it's used for birth control now. That's what it's used for.
Yeah.
Primarily
Many
is for
cases.
birth
Many cases.
control.
Many cases.
But you know,
And-
Clayton, before you get too far, explain to the audience a little bit about Sandra and the Doe v. Bolton case, because a lot of people are not familiar with that case.
Well, it's what was called a companion case. It's a case that went up to the Supreme Court at the same time as the Roe case. Everybody hears Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade. But Doe v. Bolton was just as much as part of Roe v. Wade as my two hands are clasped here together, because they would defer one to another back and forth. And this health exception ultimately led to the case Nebraska versus Carhart, which is a case, by the way, that Sandra Day O'Connor voted in favor of, allowing partial birth abortion. Now, partial birth abortion is where the baby is delivered except for its head. Scissors are plunged into the base of the baby's skull. The brains are sucked out of the baby's head, and a dead baby delivered. Now, that's barbaric.
It is
But
barbaric.
Sandra Day O'Connor voted and said because there was no health exception in the bill, she had to vote down a bill banning that barbaric practice.
And you know, in the health exception in the Doe v. Bolton case, in my opinion, is the most dangerous case. I mean, Roe v. Wade had some restrictions.
That's right.
As to where Doe v. Bolton struck down those restrictions with this health. And health can mean mental health, situational